Thank you for joining us here. I am here with attorney Andre Wharton of the Wharton Law Firm. Mr. Wharton, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I have a couple of questions for you regarding the task force. Of course, you are representing at this time 41-year-old Darrin Pigram. Just to give people a bit of a reminder of what happened here, he was killed on May 13th after, from what we were told, the Memphis Safe Task Force attempted to serve him warrants related to aggravated assault and burglary and a couple of other things. And then they say that he pulled a gun and then they shot him following that. I want to ask you, based on that account, if what you just heard me say is correct by your standard, or if you think there's things that needed to be added to that narrative.
Well, first, again, thanks for having me today, just to kind of talk about these issues. I think it's significantly important to get these stories out and the issues out in front of the community first and foremost. Specifically as to Darrin's situation, Darrin Pigram, that's been the narrative that has been placed and put out in the media in terms of what they say transpired. We still do not know if that's how things went. I should know more soon, we hope. The investigations are still ongoing at this point. Still some questions in my mind in terms of the order of things. Was there criminal conduct that took place, or alternatively, was there something that was violative of the United States Constitution? Was this an unreasonable, what we call unreasonable seizure, which that can be a shooting, that can be a gun pull, that can be a beating, but it's basically, you've heard the term excessive force. We have to ask those questions and are asking those questions. You mentioned a warrant, an active warrant. Well, you can have active warrants for individuals, but that does not mean that upon arresting those individuals that you can act in any kind of way. The Constitution still has safeguards that have to be adhered to even for folks who have warrants. So that's how we're looking at this case from that perspective. When they went and executed this warrant, did they follow the Constitution? Or did they violate the Constitution and clearly establish standards that exist in the case law and in the Constitution, and that law enforcement must adhere to? Sure. So that's the ultimate question.
And I definitely want to circle back to constitutionality in a second, but I remember the last time we spoke was at Mr. Pigram's vigil that was going on. And at that time, I know you said that you were still working to secure some of the footage from the Burger King, or maybe any body cam footage. Has that been provided to you yet?
So far, we've kind of reached some dead ends on that. I don't want to get into too many details about that just to protect the nature of the investigation. But I will tell you at this point, because of the laws governing what's public and what's not information, as far as what's public records when there's a criminal investigation, so the public is aware. Institutions, whether it be the district attorney's office or whether that be law enforcement, they're very secure in terms of what's released and when it's released. So we kind of have to work within that spectrum of the law in terms of what we can get access to. So having said that, it kind of limits us. Now, if those institutions or individuals choose or elect to show the family or show the public what has transpired in the form of body camera or camera footage, period, then we get to learn more. But to this date, we have not seen those. I don't think the public has seen those. And I hope to see that kind of material soon here. But again, you're somewhat at a disadvantage when there's not actual body camera footage that's been provided to you that's been not made public. And that's what the stage of it is now. We hope that will change some.
Sure. And one of the really interesting points about this case is the account that was given from the Memphis Safe Task Force versus what we were told when we were on scene by coworkers and family members, which was that Darrin was not armed and that he was shot in the back and on the floor. And that's a very different account of things, of course, from what we were provided from the task force. Can you comment on that at all?
Well, and see, that's where things can get very nuanced, if you will. Let's assume that Mr. Pigram was armed, okay? There again, just like I mentioned with a warrant, just because an individual is armed or later determined to be armed does not justify the Constitution being violated. Someone being shot in the back is potentially a problem from the standpoint of law enforcement if you look at what law enforcement is required to do. So a lot of this is very fact specific, it's very time specific in terms of what's happening, when it's happening, and it comes down a lot of times what the witnesses' perspectives were. If law enforcement is saying one thing about a gun being pulled and the witnesses do not support that, that's something we're looking at. If it is determined that Mr. Pigram was shot in the back, combined with witness statements and witness testimony, that can be a problem. Whether or not, again, that rises to the level of criminal culpability versus some civil violation or some civil injustice,
Sure.
Those will be questions we'll be asking. But like I said, it is very fact specific, and it's going to come down to what the witnesses saw. Your point regarding what witnesses' statements consist of thus far is something that we're considering at this point. And I think law enforcement should consider that, as well as the folks who are looking at the practices that were employed on the date in question. Were there some policy things that were violated? Irrespective of criminal responsibility, was this a shot that should have taken place that ended up being a lethal shot? Could this have been handled a different way? All those things that should be questions that the task force is asking, DEA, whoever the potential gunman was, and by whomever he was employed, those questions need to be flushed out and answered.
Sure, absolutely. A great point there. And so I want to start asking you more broadly, right? Because Mr. Pigram's incident was the first of 3 where people have been killed since the month of May, and as far as we know, generally by the task force. And to detail the other incidents, within a week of the vigil of Darrin Pigram, 25-year-old Jonah Neal was killed. Investigators have said that he had a knife and he was shot by a Homeland Security Investigations agent. And then coming to this past weekend, 20-year-old Tyron Johnson was killed on Sunday morning in downtown Memphis. The reports initially also said he was armed as well. I want to ask you generally about the types of cases that seem to be coming with the task force at this time.
It's an excellent question. I think it's an excellent issue that needs to be explored and needs to be discussed, right? And I think you have to start at the inception of the task force and how they descended upon Memphis. I think the press reported, I can't remember which outlet reported, that one of the individuals involved with making the announcement, the press announcement from the government's perspective in terms of what the task force would be doing, made a statement to the effect of they were unleashing the task force individuals on Memphis. Well, and it was something to that effect. We have to, and that was by media reports, I can't remember which outlet. That kind of language potentially sets the stage for a custom or a culture of policing that can be problematic. And particularly when you combine that with training that may be lacking. For example, the National Guard is not trained like law enforcement, a traditional law enforcement agency, i.e. Memphis Police Department, even the Drug Enforcement Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigations, these entities, Shelby County Sheriff's Department, Tennessee Highway Patrol. These individuals are usually what's called post-certified. They go through hours of training, including on de-escalation tactics, including on the United States Constitution. I go back to that, the big C word, the Constitution. Unlike a militarized entity such as the National Guard, these other entities, true law enforcement entities, receive different training. It's just the reality. So you combine that with a philosophy on let's go aggressive, which there is room for certain types of law enforcement, right? Certain philosophies on law enforcement, but still within the Constitution. And so that combines a philosophy and it combines training, proper training. So the question that has to be asked is, the examples you just brought up, the perception in the community, was this thought of in a way that would contemplate the Constitution, but contemplate the policies on let's make more arrests, let's provide support to the local agencies, but was all that thought out before the task force was created and before it descended into Memphis, into the streets? And so that's why I believe firmly, just being someone who's dealt with criminal defense cases, but also dealt with civil rights matters. I think there's a lot of uneasiness. There's a lot of discomfort with some of the things you're seeing as far as the task force and their conduct, some of the arrests that are being made. We've reviewed matters of folks going who are involved with the task force going into the wrong home and arresting people or detaining them when the information is just incorrect. So again, the question that has to be asked is, does that go back to the source of how this all started, the inception, the rhetoric that was being disseminated in the community or among the task force individuals, what they were hearing from their supervisors. Combine that with the training or lack thereof, you potentially have issues that come up that we're looking into now. So I think all those things have to be considered when you're looking at this objectively. And the community, rightfully so, wants to know, because this was, quite frankly, there was a lot of dissension in terms of how the task force came and how sudden it happened.
And you make a very interesting point there about training, which is what I want to ask you about next. And to be fair, what you were saying about being objective in that some people have seen a reduction in crime continued from what the Memphis Police Department was already doing, and believe that it is worthwhile for the task force to be here within the city. I think there is a very large question, though, which we have been trying to seek the answer to about training in this case, specifically with this most recent incident involving Darrin Johnson, where a National Guardsman or multiple National Guardsmen potentially had shot at this young man. And I think we have been trying to understand that because there is a lack of transparency surrounding what that training looks like in those entities. Do you know anything further about and I know you explained it a little bit there, but about that training that's surfacing? I know it's an abundance of agencies here, but that is a very large question about what kind of procedures they're having to go through and if that was justifiable.
No, and I think that's, and rightfully so, the question is being asked, okay, the individuals, first of all, who are the individuals that are involved in these police involved or task force involved shootings, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a National Guardsman, whomever. You have to ask the question first, the identity of those folks, and then what you want to know more importantly, not just the identity, whether it's Jane Doe, John Doe, but what's the background of that individual, whether it's in the National Guard or what's the background in terms of their training. Did they receive traditional law enforcement, city or urban type of training that law enforcement folks receive, whether it's rural, whether it's highway patrol, or whether it's local training, such as the folks who receive training, like I mentioned, Shelby County Sheriff's Department, Memphis Police Department. They receive a certain type of training to interact and deal with citizens. We don't know if that same training was given or provided, generally speaking, to the task force members, but also in particular to the National Guard. So you mentioned the Darrin Johnson situation, which I am becoming more and more familiar with by the hour, if not by the day. Concerning situation. There's a case, and again, we don't know because I haven't seen the video footage on that situation. Hopefully, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations and the involved entities who are investigating that will make that known to the public as soon as possible. Again, people want accountability. They want transparency. Was Mr. Johnson shot when he was running in an opposite direction from police? Was there an actual weapon that was brandished towards a National Guardsman or a police officer working with the National Guardsman? Or was this a shot that was made in an aggressive, kind of a knee-jerk reaction that was the result of, again, a lack of training in terms of, hey, look, somebody's running away from us, we got to stop them? That's not how it works. I told you about the Constitution. There's a case that actually emanated or came directly from this city in this state, Tennessee versus Garner. It says that if somebody is fleeing from law enforcement, you can't shoot them in the back. And I know a lot of times people say, that seems wrong, they're running. No, the Constitution doesn't allow you to shoot someone in the back. So again, I don't know if that's what occurred here, but if that is an issue, and you see it in other cases. I think there's another case that's out of Mississippi, not a task force case. But anytime you see something like that, it begs a question. It goes back to, one, was there a constitutional violation? Was there something that was clearly established? This is from the law out there. And then two, was that a result of something systemic regarding that particular person, or something systemic regarding this entity that we keep talking about? And that's where it goes back to the training.
The issue of body cameras is also something of significance here, because it does seem in incidents with the task force, if it is not a person who is directly impacted by the task force or somebody who is willingly maybe releasing that footage to the media, it does not get released. At least in the incidents that we have seen so far, some of the bigger names that have come out of incidents involving the task force. Do you think that that's purposeful, or there's reasoning behind that? And of course, I know these things go through investigation and review, but there is usually some kind of accountability made in the fact that the TBI or whoever is saying, we will release this footage, but it does not ever really seem to be released.
Sure. Well, there's certain laws that apply to investigations, criminal investigations. So there are laws regarding public records and release of those. But that does not keep the owner of the camera footage from releasing it themselves if they own it. It might apply to another entity using it, such as the TBI, or if MPD doesn't own it, they may not be able to release it, or if the DA's office doesn't own it, they may not be able to release it. Under certain exceptions, they can. But if the owner of the video footage, let's give you, for example, MPD, if they own footage, they have an option, the city of Memphis, have an option to release the footage. And in many instances, they decide not to do that. It's hard for me to speculate and get into the intent behind that, but
Sure.
we see that very often. Sometimes it's an issue of them not wanting to compromise an investigation. So I get that, looking at both sides subjectively. But when you're looking at transparency, the public, in many instances, in most instances, they want to see what happened. But so I see both sides in terms of trying to balance transparency, letting the community know what transpires so that you have greater respect for the law, and so people are not becoming suspicious because things are not being disclosed to them. But there has to be a balance. You see, what tends to be a kind of increasing trend is that cities and owners of footage are becoming, in some instances, more inclined to release because of that transparency and because they want to promote respect for the system and respect for law enforcement. So they said, let's get it out there. So, in my opinion, there's a reason why we have body camera. Now, for example, not every entity or person involved, for example, in the task force, I don't think the National Guard wears body camera. And that's not only unique to Memphis. I think in other areas where they have been deployed, they haven't worn it. The intent behind that, I don't want to speculate on whether that's nefarious, intentional, or whether it's a resource thing. I will say the trend now, lately, across the country, is for law enforcement people. Again, it goes back to, is this law enforcement or is it just a task force? It's supposed to be law enforcement. So why is everybody involved in the task force not wearing body camera? So you raise a valid point in terms of do body cameras promote greater accountability, greater transparency to wear them, and then not only wear them, produce the footage at the appropriate time. Extremely valid point. Just from my perspective, it helps. It fosters accountability, but it also fosters respect from the community. So I think it's a two-pronged thing. Mm-hmm. Whether we'll see National Guards, the National Guardsmen and the National Guard, i.e. task force, other individuals on the task force wearing it, because not everybody wears it. Whether we'll see that, I don't know. That's left to be seen, because we're kind of far in it now, and they're still not wearing it. So then you have to rely on other resources, witnesses, hopefully, camera footage from the business or the street corner or the stoplight that actually has camera footage. But again, I'm a proponent for the body camera footage, both to promote the respect for the system, respect for law enforcement, but also to promote accountability.
Questions have been coming up about National Guardsmen having guns. Initially, when the task force came to town, was deployed, we were told that National Guardsmen would not carry firearms. And Governor Lee then in October clarified that it would be a mission-dependent thing, meaning that the task force would ultimately decide in which circumstances Guardsmen were able to carry guns. Yesterday, Mayor Paul Young clarified for us that I guess between negotiations between the task force and the city, it was decided that sidearms would be carried by National Guardsmen. I think the process of that is really an interesting one, of where it went from initially there were not supposed to be firearms involved to the kind of negotiation of what that was going to look like. There seems to be a pretty quick movement as to how these things may change and not really much check-in about the ways in which they change.
Sure. Now, I think it goes back to a point we made earlier in terms of, one, transparency. What does the process look like for this new entity that's being formed? We know what MPD looks like. They've been around for years. I mean, there's an entity, there's an institution that's been here. The people know this is our police department. There's Shelby County Sheriff's Department. I mean, people know them. This new institution, i.e. this task force, involves entities that have not historically been doing the work of law enforcement. So again, you talk about the evolution of, at first they came in, they were more kind of what we call, back when I was in elementary, like the officer friendlies, right? They come in, hey, everybody, we're here just to make sure there's order, here to be support, to show a presence. But then it evolved into, as you indicate, I think in some instances there've been these longer guns, but then we also see these pistols, the kind of traditional firearm that people see. So then the question you ask is, okay, if they're going to take the next level, okay, where was the integration, if you will, with, okay, we're allowing them to carry handguns or long guns. What kind of integration is there in terms of the culture here, in terms of the local entities that you're going to be working with? Was there training to ensure that the carrying of these guns is going to be implemented consistent with the Constitution and what standard police practices are? So I think that's where the potential disconnect lies. The communication piece, how it evolved, but then also if y'all are going to be carrying firearms and doing potential traditional law enforcement, did you get the same training that these other individuals that you're working alongside have received? And I think those are the questions that cause some, as I indicated earlier, some discomfort and uneasiness in terms of how they have integrated, and it's still evolving, and it just causes some significant questions. And you see a potential, again, like I said, we don't know all details yet, you see a potential symptom of that in terms of whether it be, we're talking about shootings and lethal force, right, in these cases. But there's another thing we hadn't talked about. There's also the criminal justice component of the carrying these guns. Now, what kinds of arrests are being made with the guns? Are those things compliant? We don't automatically hear about those things. They go on through the courts, and we hope the Constitution balances that out. But it's incumbent upon everybody to understand their rights, but also as lawyers and members of the judicial system, the judiciary, to make sure that the Constitution is actually working for those cases that we don't see that result in a shooting or somebody dying or being seriously injured. So we kind of forget about that, but there's people's rights that still apply when a bad outcome or the worst outcome does not occur, and that's the day-to-day criminal interaction or interaction with police that results in an arrest, or worse, that doesn't result in an arrest, is never reported, but still the Constitution may have been violated. You follow what I'm saying? Yes. Guns and practices tend to enable that without the proper training and without the proper protocols being put in place at the outset, not as we go. Sure. You've heard the phrase, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. Well, it's kind of doing it on the back end as opposed to on the front end. Or worse, shoot first, ask questions later. But that's not, and I think, I dare say most law enforcement agencies don't want to work that way.
So I do want to circle back with you about Darrin Pigram's case and about family. So I want to ask you first about what the Pigram family is really looking for, how they're looking for justice, how they've been holding up since all of this has happened, if you can disclose any of those details. And then also, do you think that cases like Darrin's signify continuity of force with the task force? There have been concerns about that. So I want to ask you, do you think that this is something that is going to continue? Do you think that there will be pillars that might be instituted to hold them maybe more accountable in these kinds of ways? And just what your thoughts are about this entire case so far.
Well, first, to the Pigram family aspect, they're being as patient as you can be in this kind of situation, given that they're still grieving. This is still pretty fresh, and we're talking less than 2 months ago when they lost their loved one. So you know, my heart personally goes out to them continually, and I think the community, many in the community, share the sentiment of they lost a loved one, regardless of the circumstance. A loved one, a life has been lost. So we start with that premise. Number two, what kind of exacerbates that, what aggravates it, is they still don't have answers just yet. It goes back to earlier about the transparency piece, the accountability, how soon it happens. The legal system, unfortunately, can move slowly, and that can be disconcerting and very unsettling for folks like the Pigram family. So we can't discount that component. And I'm doing everything we can to try to move that along so that we get answers sooner rather than later. It is complicated by the fact that there's a collateral investigation. As you know, TBI is investigating. So we hope they'll get answers pretty quickly here in the near future. So we start with that piece. The second part of your question, I think it relates to the bigger picture, right? And how that's going to impact law enforcement, whether it's task force or law enforcement generally, but in particular, we're talking about the task force.
Yes.
But keep in mind, the task force a lot of times is not, especially in Memphis, Shelby County, is not the only entity that may be involved in police-involved shootings that require investigation, that necessitate it. But we're talking about the task force because it's a unique entity that was created. And whether we like it or not, it descended upon Memphis, and folks were not necessarily kicking and screaming to say, task force, come on in. It just happened. It just happened that way. You know, you saw the litigation about it. So here's what I hope that is taking place from a positive. I hope practices are being looked at from a high level in terms of the supervisors and the policymakers of this task force entity that's been created. Obviously it's a consortium of entities. It's a combination. So hopefully the powers that be in MPD, Memphis Police, Shelby County, National Guard, Highway Patrol, DEA, IRS, hopefully those entities are meeting on a regular basis to say, how can we comply with best practices? How can we better comply with the Constitution? Did we get it wrong here? Or could this have been done better? Even if there's not a criminal prosecution or even if there's not a lawsuit, how can we get better and engender that kind of trust that we believe we deserve because we're trying to do this for the right reasons? And so that's what I hope is going to evolve. I think it's left to be seen whether, because we don't know what's going on, and as you indicated, they're not discussing a lot of this. So we don't know what training methods have been implemented since these police-involved shootings to see how we can do things better, how they can do things better. So you raise a very valid point. Hopefully those discussions are being had and that additional training is being implemented. That's left to be seen. One, if it's happening. Number two, if they're going to report it to say, here are the measures that have been implemented with the task force so far. Here's the evolution of it. We believe we've been doing everything right, but we're going to do it even better. So we hope we'll hear that kind of communication from the task force, whether it be one person or all of the entities involved.
Absolutely. Mr. Andre Wharton of the Wharton Law Firm, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and perspective.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for joining us.